So let me show you the difference between a roof and a roofing system. With most roofs, most contractors are gonna start off a clean deck. Now, when we talk about a clean deck, that's the structural integrity of your entire roof. It's what everything is built upon. The problem is with that, most contractors, what they do is it's just kind of a remove the shingles and put new shingles back on. They're not really paying attention to if anything needs replaced. Most of the time, they're not replacing any other the components. So your drip edge stays, your flashing stays, and a lot of times you're starting off with something that it doesn't have a strong and secure base. Now let's start off with the drip edge. Now, so for the drip edge, the main purpose of the drip edge is for this lip to wick away water from the fascia, the board that's underneath. That's gonna help preserve that fascia so it doesn't start to rot from the outside in. The problem with most builder grades drip edges is that they don't replace it. 2, it's not even there to begin with. And 3, it's more of a smaller lipped drip edge. And I'll show you ours here in a little bit. But with this smaller lip, it doesn't protect as much as a larger lip would. So next, we have ice and water barrier. This is gonna go all around the perimeter of your home. So most contractors are gonna do just that because that is required for code. It has to go all the way around the perimeter of your home. It's not gonna go in any valleys. It's not gonna go around any chimneys or anything like that. And it's just gonna be one course around the perimeter. Now, what ice and water guard is that any water or ice that gets up underneath the shingle, this will protect the edges of your roof from that to start seeping through and getting up underneath into your decking and warping your decking, rotting your decking. So this is gonna be an added layer of protection that goes up there. Now let's talk about underlayments. 99% of the homes that you go to are gonna have an underlayment. Now this is felt paper. Felt paper was originally developed to protect the actual shingle from the decking itself. So what's going to be underneath the shingle is going to be pretty much the first line of defense. And what that is going to be an underlayment. Now, underlayments come in several different forms. It can either be a felt paper or some sort of synthetic. So the purpose of a underlayment is to actually protect the decking from the shingle itself. That's what it was originally developed for, but for it to be a watertight membrane, that couldn't be further from the truth. Now, this type of felt paper will serve as some sort of water resistance at first. However, over time, since it is made of paper, it will absorb water. And when you have water absorbing into this paper, your decking is underneath it. And when your decking is underneath it, that water is gonna start to absorb in the decking and then eventually rot out the decking and get into the attic. So this does serve as a temporary water barrier. It is definitely not a long-term solution. This also tears very, very fast. As soon as you put any nails or anything through this will rip really easily, and those nails will cause holes that in here, and those holes will be entry points for any water to get in. So let's move over to what most contractors are going to have right now. So most contractors are going to have a 2-ply type of synthetic underlayment. So it's not an organic type of material like the felt paper is. This is a synthetic underlayment. The biggest problem with these synthetics is that they're very, very susceptible to UV damage. Now, what that means is that if this was exposed to the sun for as just little as 6 hours, it does start to break down. And then if I have a hammer stapler, if I'm going over here to fasten down this to the decking, and then I have people walking over top of this will create some holes around any of those fasteners. And then I'm gonna put thousands of nails in here as well. And so those holes are gonna cause entry points, again, for more water to get into your decking that would eventually rot the decking out. So although, again, this does serve as a temporary moisture barrier, it is definitely not a great long-term solution. Now, moving over to shingles, the most common shingles that you're gonna see out there in the industry right now are an architectural type shingle. So that means they're gonna have different types of tabs all over here. And our shingle looks very, very similar to this shingle. However, that's where the similarities really stop. When we're talking about this shingle in particularly, like your low end GAF, Certainty, and even Owens Corning type shingles, they're all gonna have a very, very thin fiberglass matting at its core. So yes, all of these shingles are gonna have a core that's made of fiberglass. However, that quality of the core is gonna cause, or is gonna be of significance when you're adding the other layers on top. When you have a thinner fiberglass core, it's not gonna absorb the asphalt as well. And then when you start putting things on top of it, it's not gonna hold the granules. It's not gonna hold any of the algae resistance or any of the tabs as well because of that thin core. Now, the asphalt itself is more of a standard oxidized asphalt. And so, yes, asphalt goes in every single shingle. Yes, there's fillers in every single shingle that's out there in the market. The problem is with these builder grade shingles is that they have a little bit more of a higher filler rate, and they also have a lower quality asphalt rate. And so when you have a lower quality asphalt blend in here, that's going to be more susceptible to the weather. It's going to break down a lot faster. Those cheaper fillers in there are gonna help it break down a lot faster as well. And they're not gonna hold your granules in that long. You can start to see mass granule loss within about 1 to 5 years. Now, as for the granules themselves, they're gonna have some sort of algae resistance that's really sprayed on top. And when that's sprayed on top, yes, it's gonna serve as a temporary solution. However, in the long term, within 1 to 5 years, you're gonna start to see that streaking that you see on a lot of roofs today. And so as far as a long-term fix, this is not the best solution. We're seeing roofs like this last anywhere from 7 to 12 years, so about 10 years on average. Another point about this builder grade shingle is actually this nailing fin and nailing zone. Yes, there's a large nailing zone, which is good for these types of shingles. However, there's no reinforcement on the backing. So most of the time, contractors have this 7-4 rule. For every 7 nails, they're accounting for 4 to actually stick. So that means 3 of them, they're gonna be assuming are gonna blow through. And when you have blow throughs, you're creating an entry point for water to get up underneath your shingle right away. And what's underneath that shingle is those synthetic underlayments, or unfortunately, it's this felt paper. And again, these already have intrusion points that are in them already, so you're already setting yourself up for failure just at the very beginning during install. Now, the last thing I'll talk about with these types of shingles is the actual tabs themselves. Now, these tabs have a bead of tar at the top and at the bottom of these shingles. So it's very, very easily for me to lift up with very minimal effort and create a space underneath these tabs. Now, if I can do that, imagine snow, imagine water, imagine rain on here. And in these colder climates, if there's water up underneath these tabs, and if that were to freeze, when water freezes, it expands. And when water expands like that, it creates more of an entry point. So this is one of the first fail points of this actual shingle, is that you're gonna start seeing these tabs blow off in the neighbor's yard. You're gonna start running over them with your lawnmower, and it's just gonna be a big issue. So in the long term, this is a temporary solution, but it's not a long-term solution. Now let me show you the difference between a roof and a roofing system. Now, all roofs should start off with a clean deck. However, with most contractors, they're gonna do a peel and apply back on. So they're gonna take the shingles off, and then they're gonna put the shingles back on. Now, they're not gonna necessarily pay attention to if any flashing needs replaced. They're not gonna pay attention if any drip edge needs replaced, and they're really just gonna put on something new on top of, unfortunately, something old. So your integrity of the actual roofing system starts to be compromised right there at its core. Now, this is what's called drip edge. Drip edge is gonna apply on all your edges, so around all your eaves and all your rakes. Its purpose is to wick water away from the fascia that's underneath this. Now, when you have fascia underneath this board, you can see that this has a smaller lip. So this lip is not gonna protect the entire fascia board, and it's actually gonna allow more water to intrude onto that board and to lay on that board. And so it can start rotting away at a more faster rate. Now, this right here is ice and water barrier. Now, the purpose of ice and water guard is to prevent any water and moisture from getting into your decking, especially when it gets up underneath the shingles, most commonly through ice dams, so from your gutters or your gutters over leaking and getting up underneath the shingles. It is a waterproof membrane, and it will seal around any nails that go through this. The problem with builder grade is that they're just gonna do what's up to code. So code is that they're just gonna do one course around the entire perimeter of your roofing system. The next layer of defense is your underlayment. Now, so this is felt paper. Around 99% of the houses that we go to have felt paper on them right now. Now, felt paper is just that. It's construction paper dipped in an asphalt blend. Now, this will serve as a temporary water resistance, but is definitely not a long-term solution. If I were to dip this into water or run this underneath the sink, it'll quickly start absorbing water, and it'll start to show that it's not gonna protect what's underneath it. Think about this as a sponge, and if this sponge is sitting on your decking is made of wood. That wood is very, very porous, and it's gonna soak up all of that water and eventually start to rot that thing out. A step up from that is a 2-ply type of synthetic underlayment. So yes, this is a lot better than felt paper. However, it does have its pitfalls as well. The most common pitfall with these types of underlayments right here is that it's very, very susceptible to UV damage. So UV damage comes from the sun. So if this were to be rolled out, and it can start taking on damage as early as 6 hours. Now, with just 6 hours of damage and UV to this, it starts to get brittle. It starts to break down in the sun. So if your house is left unshingled for a fair amount of time, this will break down a lot more. And when you start to put nails and when you start to put staples onto this, and then you have installers that are walking over top of this, it'll start to tear around those nails and around those staples, creating holes in your underlayment. Now, that purpose of this underlayment should be to block any water from getting onto that decking, because again, we don't want water sitting on top of wood, because eventually that is going to rot out and get into your attic and cause leaks and so on and so forth. Another thing about this is that it's very, very slippery on both sides of this. So the installers have to be extra careful, or else, there is a risk of job site injuries. And this is going to be tugging and tearing on any of those screws and fasteners that are going through this underlayment. Next, we'll talk about a builder grade type shingle. The most common type of shingle that you're gonna see out there on the market right now is an architectural shingle. Now, these architectural shingles are very, very easily distinguished because it does have these tabs on here. Now, although our shingle looks pretty much very, very similar to this, that's pretty much where the similarities end. Everything is on how this is actually constructed and manufactured itself. So when we go to the actual core of this shingle, this does have a fiberglass core, and unfortunately this core is very, very thin. Now, that's a thin core to allow cheaper manufacturing costs. So the problem with a thin core is that it's gonna absorb asphalt at a very, very low rate, and it's not gonna retain that asphalt in there. And so anything that were to go on top of that asphalt, like your granules or any type of adhesives, they're not gonna be able to stick. And so you're gonna see a lot of granular loss right away. Now, when we're talking about the asphalt itself, it is a standard higher filler asphalt blend that most companies are using, again, because it's cheaper to go that way. And when you go with a cheaper asphalt blend like that, it starts to break down a lot faster. So it's not going to hold up against the freeze and thaw cycles for years. It will hold up temporarily, but it will start to degrade a lot faster because of that lower quality asphalt. Now, the granules on top, again, they are a stone granule that's on here, and they do have a light coating of algae resistant on top of that. Now, the problem with that coating is that it will wear away within about 1 to 5 years. So yes, temporarily, this will be great. However, longevity, you're going to start to see streaking, you're going to start to see mass granule loss, and it's not going to have the aesthetics that it once had when it was very first put on. Now let's talk about the actual tabs that are on here. These tabs are actually adhered by a small tar bead, and so this tar bead is going to be on the front and on the back. However, in the middle, you're not going to have anything in here, so it's very, very easily for me to lift this up with very, very minimal effort. And if I can do it with very, very minimal effort, think about this having water on top of it. Think about this having snow on top of it, and any ice were to get up underneath this tab. Now, ice will expand, and when it expands, it's just gonna lift this more, leaving this a lot more susceptible to any wind damage that's out there. So commonly, this is going to be the very first fail point of these types of shingles. You're going to find these tabs in your neighbor's yard. You're going to run over them with your lawnmower, and unfortunately, it's not going to look very good, and it's not going to be protecting your home and your roofing system, and the roofing system's integrity is obviously going to be compromised with that. Now, with these types of shingles, underneath there is a tar strip, and that tar strip needs about 50-degree weather for about a week straight in order to adhere down here. So if it's installed under that 50 degrees, there is a chance that these won't adhere to the decking at all, and this will start to fly off. So we have to make sure that when these do get installed, it has to be 50 degrees or more. Now, when it comes to the nailing strip, this nailing fin right here, although it's very, very large, it does lack reinforcement. So in the roofing industry, contractors have a 7-4 rule. So for every 7 nails that go into this strip, 4 of them should stick. That means that they're accounting for 3 of them to actually blow through this nailing fin right here. And so when you have holes from the nails that have actually blown through here, you're already letting water have an easy entry point underneath the shingle. And underneath the shingle, unfortunately, you have a temporary water barrier like this, or a very, very temporary water barrier like this underneath. And with both of these types of systems right here that have this, water is going to be able to get into your decking at a much more rapid rate. Although it does look like a good system from the outside, and it is a great temporary fix, this is definitely not a long-term solution for any type of homeowner out there.